If you own a modern Land Rover product, you need to own a diagnostics tool. But which of these should take your cash? Stick around to find out. If you buy a Range Rover L322 or you're very soon to buy one, the very next thing you should buy should be a diagnostics tool. The amount of questions I get from people trying to diagnose a problem with their Range Rover without even having access to a diagnostics tool is truly amazing. And you see similar questions all the time from new owners on Facebook pages and online owners groups. Even if you don't intend to work on your own car as much as I do with this one, it's definitely a good idea to carry a diagnostics tool around with you, because you never know when you're going to need to give that air suspension system a kick up the arse or reset an engine warning light. I'll be honest, it's very rare that you actually do need to do things like that, but if you do, it could be a lifesaver. So now you've decided you want a diagnostics tool, which one do you get? Because there are a multitude of them out there, and it's not always clear which ones would work best with the Range Rover L322 or other Land Rover products, as the case might be. So in this video, I'm going to compare 3 common options for diagnostics tools that you might want to buy for your Range Rover L322, and hopefully I'll be able to help you decide which one you want to buy. So these are the 3 units I'm going to test today, and I've chosen these 3 in particular because they cover quite a good range in terms of price. Starting with the Topdon RT-Link 600. That's about £100 for that unit, and it's a generic OBD2 diagnostics tool that will work with any car of any brand, and it's not specific to Land Rover or Range Rover products. And then moving up a little bit more, we've got the iCarsoft LRV3, so it's the new version of the Land Rover based diagnostics tool from iCarsoft. This is around the £200 mark, and it's actually specifically for Land Rover and Range Rover products. And the iCarsoft tool covers a pretty good range of Land Rover models, all the way from stuff like the Discovery 2 all the way up to the latest Discovery 5 and Range Rover models. And although you don't get all of the functions on all of the cars, it covers a pretty good range of vehicles, and it's pretty versatile as a result of that. And then thirdly, in the most expensive spot, we've got this Gap IID tool. This is a Bluetooth version, and that comes in around £400. This really is the benchmark tool. It's the one to beat for Range Rovers and Land Rover models, just purely because of the breadth and range of capabilities this unit has. It goes into more detail and it has much more powerful options than a lot of diagnostics tools that you might find. There is a catch with the IID tool though, and that is that on this version, the £400 version, you have to VIN lock it to your own vehicle. So once you've done that, the vast majority of the very powerful functions are locked to your own vehicle. And aside from basic diagnostic functions, you can't use it on any other vehicle. There is actually another version of this tool called the IID Pro, and you'll pay nearly £2,000 for that, as well as a £500 a year subscription fee on top as well. So not really designed for the home DIY user. Obviously, the main difference between the IID tool and these two is that this is used in conjunction with a mobile phone or tablet via Bluetooth to control the diagnostic system, whereas these are dedicated units with screens and buttons. It's personal preference as to what you really prefer. Some people might not want to carry around a dedicated unit, and others might find that using it on a touch screen on your phone isn't quite as nice to use as an actual dedicated screen, but it's all personal preference at the end of the day, and I can see the attraction of both. So how am I going to test these units to find out which offers the best blend of abilities and value for money? Automotive diagnostics is quite a complicated subject. There's quite a few different reasons that you might want to plug a diagnostics tool into your car. The most basic, of course, though, is just reading fault codes. And fault codes are a standardized system that let your car tell you what's wrong with it. And it's standardized across pretty much every manufacturer. However, with cars like the Range Rover, which have different systems above and beyond the normal sort of engine management or ABS that you might get on every normal car, so things like the air suspension system, the traction control system, or the adaptive damper system on the Range Rover may not be able to be read by a typical run-of-the-mill diagnostics tool like this Topdon. Another important aspect of diagnostic tools is the ability to read live data from the car. So this is the ability for the tool to be able to read and interpret those live data signals from all the sensors around the car and to display that to you in a meaningful way on the screen. Live data is actually a very powerful tool for diagnosing problems with the car, and it can be very, very useful for trying to fault find an issue that doesn't necessarily result in a fault code, but is definitely causing an issue in the way the car's working. And again, the number of live data signals that we're actually going to get is going to vary between these 3 systems. And then there are a few more specific tasks that the diagnostic tools can do for you. Things like the battery management system that I used recently to reset the battery on the Range Rover, or the ability to talk to the electronic parking brake module to reset that if something goes wrong. calibration of the air suspension system is another very important one for Range Rover owners. And then there's slightly more basic things like being able to reset the oil service light when it's time to change the oil. I'm going to take a look at all these things on these 3 units and find out which unit is capable of doing what. So for our first test, we're going to start with a fairly easy one. What I'm going to do is disconnect the MAF sensor on this airbox here and hopefully induce an engine warning light by doing so. Once I've done that, I'm going to plug in the diagnostics tools one at a time and just make sure that all of them can pick up that code and tell us what's wrong. That's the plan anyway. Hopefully the Range Rover doesn't get too angry with me pulling out his wires and stuff, but we should be able to reset them. We've got enough diagnostics tools back there. So we've unplugged that sensor. Let's turn on the ignition now, start her up and see if we get a nice big engine warning light. There we go, we've got that lovely, scary, restricted performance light on the dashboard straight away, which is the light that all of us Range Rover owners hope we'll never see. The likelihood is though that you probably will. Anyway, so I'll turn the engine off now, grab our first diagnostics tool and we'll give it a go, see if it can read the code. So the first tool we're going to try is the diminutive Topdon RT-Link 600. And this is actually a really good little tool and I've used it on a few different cars that my friends were buying actually to give them a bit of a pre-purchase scan. And it actually worked really well, picked up some good faults. It's nice and easy to use. So I'm actually pretty impressed by this thing. So I'm expecting it will be able to pick up this fault code, no issue. So I'll pop our link lead in here, connect it to the Topdon RT-Link 600. And it should turn on straight away, which it does. So here we go on the Topdon AL600. We're going to go into the OBD2 mode. And then it's going to scan on the cable for what type of connection we've got. Once it does, it will go through and give us our code reading abilities. So there we go, it's picked it up. So we're going to go read codes. And then straight away we've got mass or volume airflow A circuit low, so a P0102 code. And also intake air temperature sensor 1. Which I'm pretty sure is in the same sensor as that MAF sensor, so that's good. It's picked up 2 codes there, and say this was a real problem, that would actually give you a really good direction as to where to start looking. You'd know to go and look at that MAF sensor, and you'd notice in this case that it's unplugged. So there we go, that's good. We're not going to clear them obviously, because it won't clear with the fault still active, so we'll exit out of this and we'll grab the next unit, which is going to be that iCar tool LRV3. So here we go, we've got the iCarsoft tool. We're going to connect it up in the same way. It's actually got a very similar connector type to the Topdon we just had there a minute ago. And again, the unit should start straight up, which it does. So we've got this starting screen on the iCarsoft. We're going to go straight into OBD2 again to look for any lights and warning lights on the vehicle. There we go, it's doing the same thing, talking to the engine management system, and it says MIL status off, so it's telling us that the engine light is actually off, although it technically is on at the moment, but perhaps it means the actual normal orange warning light that you get on most cars. It's saying it's found 2 codes, so we're going to go enter on those codes, read codes, and then I'm expecting, yeah, we've got the same codes here, that P0102, mass airflow circuit low, and again that intake air temperature sensor. So yeah, we picked up the same codes as the Topdon. That's what I expected, so that's good. It means you'd also be in a pretty good place if you wanted to fix that fault with the iCarsoft as well. So we'll exit the diagnostic function and we'll go to our last unit, the IID tool. So our third tool is of course the IID tool Bluetooth, and I'm going to use my phone for this of course. So I'll turn my Bluetooth on. And I'm going to do a screen recording on this for you guys so you don't have to look at my phone through the camera screen. So there we go, recording screen. We're going to open up the IID tool app and we're going to connect to, well, it'll help if I plug this in first. So plug that Bluetooth adapter in as you normally would. We're going to head into the IID tool app again, connect to the last tool. So it's all connected there, it loads up all of its stuff. And then on the IID tool, we simply just have to go to the faults menu on the window here. It's going to say faults will be read, press continue. And this is going to read faults across all the modules on the Range Rover. So there we go, that's our list of faults that it's dragged up. If we head into the PCM, which is the powertrain control module, we see we've got 3 faults on here. So we've got our P0102 fault there for the mass airflow sensor. We've got our P0110 there for the air intake temperature, which is the same that we had on the other 2. But then on this one, we also pick up this P040D exhaust gas recirculation temperature circuit. Now this is a fault code I've had on the system for a long time. It's something that appears on pretty much all 4.4 TDV8 Range Rovers, and it's to do with a temperature sensor in the exhaust. It doesn't seem to cause any issues with running. It's just one of those sort of flukes about the system, but pretty much all of them have got this fault on them. But it is interesting that the other 2 fault coders there didn't pick up that 3rd code, which might suggest there's some kind of a limitation in the types of codes they can read. Anyway, so that's all 3 tested on that first test. What I'm going to do now is connect that sensor back up again, reset the code with the IID tool, and then we're going to head on to the next test. So our next test is going to be a little more tricky than the last one. What I'm going to do is climb under the Range Rover here, unplug the height sensor for the suspension on this rear left corner, and then we're going to check to see if the code readers can pick that up. So that's a little bit more specialised than your typical engine management fault. Let's give it a go. So there we go, that height sensor is now disconnected, which in reality would cause all kinds of issue if you tried to drive the Range Rover now. Now we're going to put the ignition on again and see what kind of trouble we've caused now. Suspension fault, so there we go. There's our yellow warning triangle, we've got our suspension fault showing up. So in theory we should be able to read that code now with our code readers and find out what kind of a problem we've caused. Now we're going to plug the Topdon AL600 in. Now I'm not holding out too much hope for this because it's a pretty specialised system, that air suspension system, and it's unlikely this is going to be able to interrogate the system, but we will have a go. So where are we going to start? Let's go to our OBD2 system again. So again, it's connecting to the car. We're going to read our codes again and see what we get. So for some reason on the Topdon it comes up with 2 ECUs here, so we're going to try ECU 1 again. This might be the engine management system, and it probably is. It says it's got no fault codes. We'll exit out of that. We'll go to ECU 2, whatever that is. And again, it says no fault codes on there. I think that possibly is the ABS module. So from that part of the system anyway, it seems that that is its limit in terms of code reading. Engine management system and ABS on this car anyway. So we're going to try heading into this scan function, which I think is supposed to be some kind of a diagnostic function. We're going to try again, just give it another chance. Land Rover V12.4. I'm going to tell it it's a Range Rover, that it is a 2010 to 12 model, and that it is a 4.4 diesel V8. We'll go through automatic diagnose mode and see if it can pull anything up. But again, here it does just look like it's looking at ABS and SRS. Unfortunately, it's not looking at anything else apart from those 2 systems. We'll read them just for the hell of it, but I don't think there's going to be any codes on here that we can find. Aha! Now that's interesting. So we're actually reading here the ABS control module, and because the ABS control module talks to the air suspension control module, it's being told by the air suspension module that it's got an invalid data received from the ride level control module. Now that isn't actually telling us anything about the actual problem in the suspension, i.e. you wouldn't know where to look by looking at this fault code, but it is at least picking up that code from the ABS saying that the ride level control module is telling it there's a problem. So better than nothing, but not exactly helpful. Just wondering if there is anywhere else in here that we can try and find this fault code. I don't think there's going to be anything. So there we go. I think we've actually found, guys, the first limitation with this Topdon AL600 system, and it's by no means unique to the Topdon. Pretty much any generic fault code reading system is going to struggle with those more specialised systems like the air suspension module and things of that nature on the Range Rover. So unfortunately that's a mark down for the Topdon, but I didn't expect it to be able to do this anyway, so yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the Land Rover V3. So firing up the iCarsoft LRV3 again, we're going to head into the OBD2 check again for a start, just to see if we can pull anything up from there. So it's already telling us it hasn't found any fault codes now that we've cleared those engine management ones. We're going to head into there anyway read them just to be sure, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to find them on this bit. So there we go. So it's not finding faults there. So we're going to try heading into Diagnostics and see what that does. Diagnostic for Land Rover. It's not entirely clear from this screen which one of these you're selecting at any one point. So we'll try that. We're on Jaguar again. So it's actually the black. It's actually the black selector that is the one that's highlighted. So we'll go for that, Land Rover. VIN identity, ignition on, read code. There we go, we've got our code. So there we go, it's pulled up my vehicle information correctly this time. That was my mistake there. And it appears to have identified it correctly as a 4.4 TDV8 2012 model year. Press OK, application is running. So I'm not entirely sure what the difference between quick test and auto scan is, but I'm going to try auto scan because that's basically what I want it to do. I want it to scan all of the systems on the car. There it goes, picking up all of the modules on the car then, scanning through them all and scanning the codes that are held within. It's picked up 18 so far, 19, quite a few modules on this model of Range Rover L322. 28 modules, there we go. So now I think it's up to us to go and select these modules in order to interrogate the system and find out if there's any codes they're in. So ignition switch to on, we're now interrogating this module. So we're going to read the fault codes on the ride level control module. So there we go, we've got two codes come up. C1A70-1C, state intermittent, rear left height sensors of voltage supply. So there we go, it's pointing to the correct height sensor. We've got another code, permanent rear left height sensor, C1A05-1C. So there we go, it's definitely pointing us in the right direction with these codes. So I actually went through and put the quick test mode on there, and it actually now is going through each module and testing for faults on each one, which is a bit more useful because you might not necessarily know to look at the ride level control module for a fault. So now that it's done that, we can cycle through and see where there are faults on everything. There's a few here that have popped up. So there we go. That's actually showing now that the ride level control module has got a fault, so that's definitely more useful than having to interrogate each ECU individually. So there we go. LRV3 was able to find that air suspension fault that I set earlier, as you'd expect for a Land Rover Specialized tool. So that's definitely useful. If you had this kind of fault on your car with a height sensor or maybe with a compressor, you definitely will be able to be pointed in the right direction by the iCarsoft tool. So that's good. Right, let's move on to the IID tool. So back on the IID tool again, we are going to, I'll start my screen recorder again for you guys. We're going to head back into faults and we're going to reread all those faults again. This time we're hoping to find a nice air suspension fault. So there we go, we've picked up a few more faults now. That one on the ABS brake module is that same one that we picked up on the Topdon earlier, which is to do with the data being transmitted from the ride level control module to the ABS module. So that's definitely been confirmed by our IID tool. And if we head into the ride level module itself, you can see we've got two faults there again. Ride level rear left height sensor supply, so voltage out of range on the supply, and rear left height sensor general electrical failure, circuit voltage out of range. So these are the same faults that we picked up on the LRV3, but one thing I would say about the IID tool is it has given us a bit more information here in terms of the details of the faults. Now, of course, if you had the LRV3, you could just take those codes that it gives you and you can plug them into Google, and that will give you this description and a lot more information as well. But it is nice that the IID tool just gives you that extra bit of information on the fault code page there. So yeah, top marks for IID tool. Right, that concludes that test, and it's pretty much as expected. So we'll move on to the next stage. So the next aspect of diagnostic tool usage we're going to look at is going to be live data. As I explained earlier, that is a very important part of using a diagnostic tool these days. On very, very basic code readers, you're not going to have that functionality at all. You're just going to have the ability to read the codes and clear them, and not much else apart from that. All three of these units, though, advertise the ability to read live data. So we're going to give that a go and see what we get out of each of them. So starting again with the Topdon. One nice feature on the Topdon that the others don't have actually is this LED torch in the actual plug itself. So if you're trying to find an OBD2 port that's not that easy to see, you can use that to kind of torch your way there, which is quite nice. So on the Topdon, to get into the live data section, we're going to go through the OBD2 menu, wait for it to connect again. Hopefully you guys can see the screen all right on the GoPro there. Once it's connected, we're going to head down to data stream. And again, so it's only giving us these two ECUs, which we know now pretty much, I'm pretty sure they're the engine control module and the ABS module. So we're going to see what data we can get off the engine. So there we go, the data stream is showing we've got 30 items we can look at from that engine control module. So in here you've got things like engine coolant temperature, manifold pressure, engine RPM, what else have we got? Air intake temperature, throttle position, a few other bits here, fuel rail pressure, EGR, fuel level input, ECU voltage there, ambient air temperature. So quite a basic look at the engine control module's values there. This definitely would be useful if you're trying to diagnose an engine running issue. There's definitely more use to having this than not having any data at all. So yeah, not too bad. I guess it's your kind of standard engine ECM data values it's pulling out for us here. Let's see if we can do anything else here. See if we can view graphic items, see what this does. So I think this is basically going to show a graph and you can select which values you want to put on here. So we can say, so for example, we can put on our coolant temperature, our intake manifold absolute pressure and engine RPM, and this should plot a graph for us. How do we, so exit to confirm. So there we go. So it's just made a little graph for you there. Again, that could be useful in diagnosing a fault. You'd be able to notice any trends in the data for a fault that you were looking for. So yeah, it's definitely useful. I wouldn't say it's the most advanced live data stream ever, but it's definitely useful, and as I say, much better than having nothing at all. So we'll come out of this and then we'll head into the ECU2, which we think is the ABS, and see what values we can get from that. Okay, so this is slightly strange because it probably is the ABS module, but it's giving us more engine related stuff, and this is probably just the values that are pulled through by the ABS module from the ECU. So again, this is basically, yeah, the same info we've had before, but in a more limited fashion. So yeah, not particularly useful there. So yeah, there we go. That's the live data capabilities of the Topdon AL600. Nothing really surprising there. That's pretty much what I expected for a sort of generic OBD2 reader, but I will say it does a pretty nice job of displaying the data. You get a graph mode, which is always useful. And like I said, you'd definitely be pleased to have this unit in the car rather than nothing at all, except when you were trying to find a fault. So yeah, we'll move on to the next one. So we're going to head down to live data again on the iCarsoft and see what we've got. So it's got an option here for all supported data. So we're going to hit that and see what it brings up. Okay, so this is interesting. So iCarsoft LRV3, this is a specialized Land Rover based diagnostic system. It appears at the moment to be showing us the same 30 values that we got from that Topdon AL600 there, the generic system. There may be a few different ones in here, but all I'm seeing so far is your basic engine management system values that you would get on any OBD2 scanner. So however, one function the iCarsoft is giving us here that we didn't have on the Topdon, I'm pretty sure, is the ability to record. So we can actually press enter on these items to record data. And you can see there it's counting the data points at the top. So that presumably will store that data somewhere on the system for us to then go back and review at another point. And there we go. So it's saying that it's recorded that log somewhere on this machine. So we'll be able to review that and presumably transfer it to a computer as well via this SD card in the bottom. So there you go. That's maybe a slight functionality gain over the Topdon so far. What I'm going to do now though is head back into this diagnostics menu, because this seems to be the part of the machine that is actually specialised for Land Rover and Jaguar vehicles. So we're going to head back into this and see if there's anywhere in here that we can view live data. So we're going to go for VIN identity again. This is one thing that is quite nice on the IID tool, because it just automatically reads your VIN as soon as you plug the unit in, so you don't have to go through this rigmarole of telling it to scan your VIN for you. So on the iCarsoft, on the iCarsoft, we actually have to go into this individual control unit mode in order to find the data that we want to view. So for example, say we're looking at that suspension again. If we go onto the ride level control module, we can then individually view the data for that module. So here we go, it's giving us a list of 72 values just for that air suspension module. So this looks a lot more detailed than what you might have got on the Topdon there. So let's find, so there we go, we can select our corner heights here, and maybe we can have a look at some voltages as well. Gallery pressure, let's have a look at that, press done, and then there we go, that's going to show us live data as the ride level control module is reading it right now. So this is definitely a lot more useful for something like the Range Rover, where you've got an absolute multitude of sensors and actuators all over the vehicle. These cars really are driving computers, so being able to interrogate all of those modules and get live data off them is pretty much invaluable in my opinion. We also have the ability to press all here, so I'm guessing this is going to load all of those values at once, and then we can just scroll through them all here and see what the values are coming back as. And all of this stuff here looks to be pretty complete in terms of all of the values that you can get from that ride level control module. So that's definitely a very useful feature there to have. So there we go, iCarsoft, definitely a bit more functionality there than we saw on the Topdon, the generic scanner. The ability to interrogate all of those modules and read live data off them is definitely something that I would find very useful, particularly with stuff like the air suspension. Being able to read the actual sensor data that you're getting live from the vehicle is invaluable if you're trying to fault find an issue on the car. So yeah, definitely top marks for the iCarsoft there. One thing I did notice that's missing from the iCarsoft though is the ability to actually plot a graph on the screen whilst you're looking at that live data. You can of course record it to this SD card that comes supplied with the iCarsoft, and then transfer that to your computer so you can interrogate the data at a later date. But it would be nice just to see that graph on the screen as well, because that could be quite useful occasionally. Anyway, onto the IID tool. Okay, so heading back into the IID tool. And from using the IID tool previously, I know that this is actually one of the tool's best aspects. The ability to view and plot data on the IID tool is really second to none for me. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you what I mean by that. So if we head into log live values, we've got a few options here. The first thing we want to do is select our live values, and it gives you an option here of a quick list or a complete list. So we're gonna go into the quick list just for now. This is a list of values selected by gap, which are they think probably the most common ones you're going to want to look at. So we'll go with that for now. And again, we've got a lot of the same values that we saw in that iCarsoft tool. But just for an example, I'll show you some of the little tricks that IID tool has up its sleeve. So say we wanted to look at the height values for the suspension on the Range Rover, we can bring up this top one here, which is actually a programmed layout that gives you this really nice display of the vehicle heights in relation to where they are on the vehicle. So we've obviously got our 4 corner heights here, live data, and it just shows it to you in this really nice pictographic way, which is just a lot nicer than looking at some lists of data on a screen there. We can also head into this graph mode at the top, and if we rotate the phone round, we get an instant readout of a graph here that we can pinch in on, we can zoom in on, and this is really fantastic because you can zoom in, you can pinch out, you can reset the graph there. If we open this menu on the side here, and we of course have the ability to log data and save it to our PC as well for interrogation at a later date. But yeah, it's just for live data viewing, the IID tool pretty much is very, very hard to beat. We of course have all the other normal values on here as well, and you can select as many as you want and bring them up on the screen, and it gives you this nice big readout on your phone. So really, yeah, for live data, IID tool is very hard to beat. So top marks there for IID. So the last thing I want to look at on these units is extra features. So we've looked at code reading, we've looked at live data, but what extra features do you get on these units that they can help you accomplish different tasks that you might want to do on your Range Rover? So let's have a look and see what this Topdon's got to offer over and above the basic OBD2 functions. So I'm going to head into this service menu here and just see what it's got to offer us. Might help if I turn the ignition on. Really, that bong is really annoying. I might have to look and see if there's a way I can disable that somehow. So the Topdon has brought up 3 options for us straight away, and we've got BMS reset, oil reset, and SAS reset. So BMS reset is what I've done recently actually. When I replaced the battery in the Range Rover, you need to reset the battery monitoring system to tell it that you've got a new battery. So that's really good that this has got that functionality built into it. Secondly, oil reset is a really useful thing to have if you service your own vehicles like me. You you need to be able to tell the car that it's been serviced, otherwise it's going to keep trying to remind you that you need to give it an oil service. So that's definitely a really good useful feature to have on here. SAS reset is to do with the steering angle sensor. So there may be occasions where you actually need to reset or calibrate the angle sensor of the steering. And this angle sensor feeds into a lot of different systems on the Range Rover. A lot to do with the stability systems and the ABS and things like that. All read that data from the steering angle sensor, so it is actually quite a crucial part of the Range Rover, and good that you can calibrate it through this system. So anyway, in terms of the service menu, that seems to be everything we get in there, which is better than nothing, but it's not exactly comprehensive in terms of what you can do with the Range Rover in terms of diagnostic tools. So better than nothing, but not too comprehensive. We also have this DTC lookup, which you can use to look up a fault code. So if you know a code that your car's got on it, you can put it in here, and it will give you a bit of a brief description of what that is. But yeah, apart from that, really not that much else. Again, that's kind of to be expected with a generic OBD2 tool like this, but yeah, definitely worth having in the car. So moving on to the iCarsoft LRV3, and this guy should have a lot more functions on it than that Topdon unit over there. So we're heading to the service menu and see what we've got. And straight away, we've got loads more stuff to play with in here than we did on the Topdon. So again, we've got oil reset, we've got BMS in here as well, and we've got this SAS steering angle sensor that we had on the Topdon. So we've got those three. But in addition to that, we've got EPB, which is your electronic parking brake. So if we head into this, we can try and see what functions we've got. Just out of interest. So there we go. On the EPB, we've got 4 options we can do here. We've got longitudinal accelerometer calibration. So there's an accelerometer in the center of the car that we can calibrate, which is good to know. Drive the parking brake to the mounting position, drive the parking brake to the latching position. So if we wanted to, we could actually physically move the electronic parking brake using this tool. And we've got an unjam procedure on here as well. So that definitely seems like it would be useful. What else have we got? ETC, what's this going to be? Looks like it's something to do with the engine. This VIN identity thing is definitely a pain in the arse. I wish it would just remember the VIN and keep it stored. Perhaps there is a way to do that, but having to go through it every single time is a bit of a pain in the arse. Okay, so that's saying it's not supported on this vehicle, so that's a big... Okay, so this is quite a big one that you wouldn't have got on the Topdon there, and it is the DPF. So this will be interesting to see what functionality it actually has on this car. I'm sure the Range Rover is sick and tired of having its VIN number read by now. So there we go, we've got option to regen the DPF, and we've also got the option to carry out the replacement procedure on the DPF. So that also might be useful. Dynamic regeneration, I'm not entirely sure what that is. It might be that it forces the car to try and do a regeneration. So if your DPF is clogged, perhaps that'll be a useful thing. The car should, in theory, try and regen itself anyway. I'm guessing you might need to use this if the car has put itself into a state where it's locked out DPF regens due to too many failures or something like that. And then DPF replacement procedure, I guess, is just telling the car it's had a new DPF on it, so it needs to adjust its operating mode. So that is, again, quite a useful thing to have over and above the Topdon there. Apart from that, what else have we got? We've got ABS bleeding, so you'd use that in the case of if you did any brake work on the car, you took the calipers off, you can use this mode to bleed the brakes using the ABS pump, which is quite a useful feature. Injectors, I'm interested to see this. So what this should be, in theory, is the ability to read and code the injectors on the car, which is quite a useful thing. Again, going through the VIN procedure, powertrain setup, injector replacement. So I'm guessing what this would be is a facility to read an injector code and then to copy that code onto the new injector that you replaced it with. Again, might be useful in the future for me in particular. If I ever have to replace any injectors on this car, that could definitely be a useful feature. So we've actually got another whole page of stuff on here to look at. So let's have a look at this suspension and see what options we've got in here. There must be a way for me to get this VIN number stored on here somewhere so it doesn't have to keep on reading it, because it's a right pain in the arse. Okay, so here we go, some useful stuff here. Air suspension deflation and air suspension enable. So these are two things that you might use if you're doing any work on the air suspension system, like replacing an airbag. You can deflate it manually from here. So instead of having to take out pipes and valves and things like that in the back, you can just deflate it using this software on here. We can set the suspension into manufacturing mode and freeze mode. We can set it into tight tolerance mode, which again is a useful feature for if you're getting the car tracked up. You need to put it into tight tolerance mode, and then showroom mode as well, which is just another one of these things that Range Rovers have. One thing that's notably absent in here at the moment though is there doesn't seem to be any ability to calibrate the height of the suspension. That possibly is somewhere else on the system, but right here it's not being shown, so we'll have to see if we can find that somewhere else. That's definitely a very key feature for a diagnostic tool for a Range Rover. Let's have a look at what else can we do? We've got trans adaptation here as well. Again, quite another useful thing. Now there's quite a few reasons why you might want to reset your transmission adaptations. It can be useful if you've just bought the car and your driving style is quite different to the previous owners. You can reset the adaptations in the transmission just to give it a fresh slate to start from. On cars like mine with very high mileages, it's probably not a very good idea to do it because the transmission has adapted to the wear that will be in the transmission from all those miles. So probably not a good idea to actually reset that, but it's good that it has that functionality. Let's have a look at engine and see what options we've got in here. Okay, so we've got quite a few different powertrain options in here, which are quite nice. All kinds of processes and procedures that you might need to go through for various things on the engine, so like oxygen sensor, oxidization catalyst, shut-off valve. So this is the turbo shut-off valve, it's down the bottom. So again, that's pretty comprehensive, quite a few things in there. Reset water and fuel detection. Yeah, again, that could a lot of these things could definitely get you out of a sticky situation. We'll have a look at body stability because I'm not sure what this is going to have in it, but we'll have a quick look out of interest. Okay, so the only thing we've got in here is a yaw rate sensor calibration. That yaw rate, that sensor can go out of calibration, so yeah, good to be able to calibrate it. Now we've got on the third page, we've got this mysterious other box, so we'll have a look at that and see what we get in here. This could be interesting, or it could be very boring. So there we go. Okay, now this is interesting. So quite a few of the most important aspects of the service menu have been hidden away in this other menu. So what we've got on here, active damping control module calibration learn. Now that is a very important one, particularly on this car, the 2010-12 model Range Rover, which has the adaptive suspension dampers. So with this ability, you can calibrate the active damping module. If you fit new dampers, the car needs to be able to calibrate to those new dampers. So that's definitely a very useful one. We've got build mode as well for the active damping module, running board control module. So if you had the active running boards, the folding automatic ones, you can do kind of a service mode for them. Adaptive speed control. So if you had the adaptive cruise, what else have we got on here? Auxiliary heater priming routine. I guess that's if you take the heater apart, you can prime the diesel through it with this, and a few other bits in here as well. So we're going to quit out of that. I'm going to head back into the diagnostics menu though, and just see if we can do anything with the ride level control module, because there's one specific feature that I'm looking for, which is the calibration of the suspension height, that I haven't seen yet. So I'm going to try and find that, give it one more chance. And we're going to head into these individual control modules and just see if there's anything in this ride level control module that I can... So I've just confirmed it there on the laptop. The iCarsoft doesn't have the functionality to calibrate your suspension height, which is a bit of an omission really, and I think they should probably look to try and add that in future versions, because that is one of the key aspects of maintaining a suspension on the Range Rover, is the ability to level it out. If you do any work on suspension, changing a height sensor, changing any kind of suspension arm or components, you need to be able to calibrate that suspension height again. So although it can calibrate the damper system, it appears it can't do the actual air suspension system itself. So yeah, bit of a shame there. But aside from that, this list of special features on here is actually pretty impressive, and there's a good amount of stuff on here that will get you out of a lot of trouble if you're doing your own work on the car. It's fairly comprehensive. It's just a shame it doesn't have that height suspension calibration mode on here. Anyway, onto the IID tool before it gets dark. So back to the IID tool, and special features are, let me tell you, the IID tool's absolute pièce de résistance. There really isn't a lot you can't do with the IID tool in terms of fiddling around and possibly breaking your Range Rover. There's a lot of stuff in here that you can do damage with, so you kind of really have to know what you're doing to do a lot of the stuff on the IID tool. But suffice to say, I've actually used the genuine Land Rover diagnostic software on a laptop called SDD, and there are literally only a couple of things that the IID tool misses out on in terms of being dealer level diagnostics. So it really is a powerful tool in that respect. So below the faults menu we used earlier, we've got two things here called height adjust and height control, both of which are really useful features. Height adjust is one that I use quite a lot, and in here you can actually set up different ride height modes for your Range Rover. So your default setting is basically the default ride height for the Range Rover, which is 493mm in the front and 483mm in the back. In here I've got a 15mm lift and a 25mm lift that actually very quickly programs the ride level control module to lift the Range Rover by 15 or 25mm, and you can customize these yourself and you can have 3 separate settings. I generally run around with a 25mm lift, mainly for looks more than anything, but it's really nice to have this functionality to be able to go in here, lift or lower your Range Rover at the touch of a button. Yeah, this is a really cool feature to have. Height control, as this warning is telling us here now, you can actually use this to operate the suspension heights on the Range Rover without being in the vehicle. So you can raise it to off-road height or down to access height, or actually all the way down to the bump stops using these buttons in here. Again, really useful feature if you're fiddling around with your Range Rover like I often do. Really nice to be able to do that. Next thing we've got in here is the calibration menu. And in here we've got all kinds of different calibrations that we can do for lots of different modules across the Range Rover. Chief among them, which we were looking for on the LRV3 iCarsoft tool there, is this ride level module suspension. And in here we've got 2 options for manual calibration or guided calibration. And again, I can't stress to you guys how useful this is if you're going to run a Range Rover. The ability to recalibrate those height sensors is a critical thing, really, in my opinion. So that guided calibration is actually quite a nice feature if you're not that experienced and you just want basically to take you through step by step, nice and easy. Manual calibration is a bit faster, but you can potentially get things a bit wrong on there. So yeah, very nice. In addition to that, we've obviously got the active damping calibration as well, which we saw on the LRV3. We've got a few other things in here as well, parking brake calibration, cruise control, ABS, transfer case, and then there are a few other calibrations in here that I won't go into, but suffice to say it's pretty comprehensive. The service test menu is next, and that actually gives you access to a lot of different actuator tests that you can do on different parts of the Range Rover. So for example, if we went into the suspension, we can test each valve individually. So we could, in theory, open or close suspension valves on each corner individually, just to make sure they're working as they should be. On the transmission page, we can clear the adaptation values on there. Body control menu has got things like battery replacement, which I used the other day for when I replaced my battery in the Range Rover. We can add a new key, which again is a feature you've not seen on any of the other tools so far. Very useful. If you lose a key and you want to buy a new one, instead of going to a dealer to get it done, you can do it yourself. On the instrument pack, we've got a service interval reset on here as well. Of course, it has that feature. The brake module has brake bleeding. Again, we've seen that on all 3 units so far. So yeah, basically just a really nice comprehensive actuation test list there. Live values, I've shown you that already. It's fantastic on the IID tool. Control IO, not a menu I've actually used before, but this actually appears that we can control the functionality of the car from the IID tool itself. So on this menu here, I can probably open and close the window just by pressing this button. I'll try it now just out of interest. But driver door window down, I'll press on, and the window is going down. So off. There we go. So so I guess if you're troubleshooting the switch or something like that, that might be useful. But yeah, it's certainly got options for quite a lot of stuff in here. Now, one final thing I'm going to talk about is this car config menu. And when I click on that, it's going to tell me that the CCF is going to be loaded into the car. And I'm not going to do this because it's actually quite an invasive procedure. I don't really want to do it with quite a low battery voltage from being sat here the whole time. But suffice to say, the ability to load the CCF, which is the car configuration file, and to make changes is probably one of the most powerful things that the IID tool can do. Within the CCF, you can make an absolute multitude of changes to the way the vehicle is set up. So just to give you a quick couple of examples of things I've been able to do by modifying my CCF file using the IID tool, I've been able to add this digital speedometer to the dashboard, and I can actually use that to show me the speed in kilometres, which is very useful for living here in Ireland. That's not something you can do unless you edit this CCF tool. You can't enable that through the car's own menus. You have to be able to do it through editing the CCF file. I've also been able to recalibrate the speedometer itself to account for the new bigger tyres using that CCF tool editor. And then there are loads of other things that you can use it for. So So for example, if I was to change the seats in the Range Rover for cooled seats, these are just heated, but if I wanted to put cooled seats in, I would obviously have to install the seats, install the switch, but even if I plugged all that in, it wouldn't necessarily work until I went into the CCF file on the Range Rover and enabled it on there. And that ability to update the spec of the car by changing that CCF file is incredibly useful. Now, because that tool is so powerful, it also means it's also quite dangerous, and there is definitely a lot of damage you could do to your Range Rover by changing the wrong settings and fiddling around with stuff that you're not really sure what you're doing. So if you are going to be messing around in the CCF file, it's definitely good to get guidance and to find for sure what you want to change before you do it, as it's not something you really want to mess up, and you can easily brick your ECU or various modules on the Range Rover. So yeah, if you do that, just be very careful with what you change. So how do we sum all this up then? Well, really, it's a question of intended use case. At one end of the scale, we have the Topdon AL600, which is meant to be a catch-all covering OBD2, ABS, SRS, and a few reset and calibration functions on as many makes and models as possible. And it does that absolutely fine. On the plus side, it's a really nicely made little unit, it's chunky and it's solidly put together. The screen is good and it has that nice live data graphing function and a facility to record and recall data, and it works with every make and model you can imagine. However, not so good is the limited service options. It's just got that BMS, SAS and oil reset, which while it's much better than nothing, doesn't really scratch the surface of what's possible on the most modern cars. However, for around £100 I really can't complain, so I'd recommend the Topdon RT-Link 600 for people who perhaps run a more run-of-the-mill or maybe a bit of an older vehicle that doesn't have such a huge array of computers on board as the Range Rover does. Next, in the middle we've got the iCarsoft LR-V3. Now, as a specialised Jaguar Land Rover tool, this really goes a lot further than the Topdon does in terms of being able to communicate with and interrogate all of those special control modules that you find on our Range Rovers. So on the plus side, it has fantastic coverage of pretty much every OBD2 equipped Jaguar and Land Rover model. It's really nicely put together unit, and again, it's not going to fall apart if it lives in your cubby box or it gets bashed around a bit. On top of that, it's got a pretty damn good range of abilities in terms of the service features, and it has a great range of live data modes. On the not so good side, in my eyes it really only has one major problem, which is that it cannot recalibrate the ride level module. For a specialised Land Rover tool, this really is a glaring omission, which I think iCarsoft really need to look at correcting for the next updated model. But at around the £200 mark, I would still recommend this as a good all-rounder, particularly if you own multiple Land Rovers of different models, because you'll actually get better coverage of abilities from the iCarsoft than you would from the IID tool, just because of that annoying VIN lockout on the IID. Now, the IID tool is quite clearly the most powerful of the three options I've shown here today, and it's very nearly as powerful as JLR's own main dealer software, SDD. It's unparalleled by anything else on the market for sheer functionality, and personally I quite like the fact that it uses a phone or a tablet as an interface. However, it's not perfect. For starters, it's not cheap. At £399 or €475, it's a significant purchase, and for some of us weekend warriors, it might actually be quite hard to justify that. You also need to factor in that it's VIN locked, meaning that the vast majority of the functions will only work on your own singular vehicle. If you have multiple Land Rovers like me, you'll need to buy an extra license from Gap at £60 or €75 for each one, which isn't the end of the world, but it is a bit annoying. It does, however, open up the possibility of sharing a Gap IID tool between 2 or 3 of your Land Rover mates, but don't tell Gap I told you that. Basically, in the absence of genuine Land Rover SDD dealer software, the IID tool is the ultimate diagnostic system for modern Land Rover products. And if you have to have the best at any cost, well, then this is it. And that about sums it up. To be completely honest and clear though, the Topdon AL600 was sent to me free of cost by Topdon, and the iCarsoft was sent to me free of cost by iCarsoft.eu for the purposes of this review. The IID tool I purchased with my own hard-earned YouTube bucks. You can check out the links to all 3 units in the description below if you'd like to purchase one yourself. That's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please do leave a like and a comment down below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on my future content. Thanks again, and see you soon. Cheers.